Going to a bookstore, enjoying a peaceful summer evening. That's something anyone should be able to do without a second thought. But not for her. A black woman walking down the street, suddenly stopped by a white police officer. No reason, just suspicion wrapped in authority. He demanded to search her bag, treating her like a suspect, as if she were someone who needed to be controlled. A crowd began to gather, phones slowly being raised, tension thick in the air. But there was one thing the officer didn't know: the woman he had targeted was no ordinary person. She was a Navy SEAL, and she was about to teach him a lesson he would never forget. The evening air in Birmingham, Alabama was thick with the warmth of summer, carrying the scent of freshly brewed coffee and the echoes of live music from a nearby cafe. The sidewalks were alive with people moving in and out of shops, their laughter and conversations weaving into the atmosphere like an invisible current. Among them, Nia Harrison walked with the quiet confidence of someone who knew how to command a room without ever raising her voice. She wasn't dressed to stand out, just a neatly tucked-in white button-up shirt, fitted black jeans, a pair of well-worn sneakers carefully maintained, and a leather crossbody bag. To anyone else, she was just another pedestrian enjoying the evening. But to Nia, every step was intentional, every glance measured. She was on her way to Oak Ridge Books, a small independent bookstore she had been wanting to visit for weeks. For the first time in months, she felt at ease. After years of serving in the Navy SEALs, where the line between safety and chaos was as thin as a blade, moments like this were rare and precious. She had spent her life navigating war zones, leading missions that drained her to the last ounce of strength. And now she was learning how to slow down. The battlefield had changed, but her instincts had not. She still scanned her surroundings, memorizing details: a couple arguing softly near a parked car, an elderly man adjusting his hat as he leaned against a lamppost, neon lights flickering and reflecting off the damp pavement. Old habits died hard. She had just reached the intersection of Tryon and 4th when she heard the sharp, deliberate screech of tires as a police cruiser pulled up beside her. She didn't need to turn her head to know the situation had shifted. A presence loomed, pressing down with unspoken authority, seeping into her awareness. "Hey," a voice called out, cutting through the city's ambient noise. "Hold up a second." Nia's stride didn't slow, but she tilted her head slightly, her gaze locking onto the source of the interruption. A white police officer, likely in his 40s with a square jaw and a buzz cut that hinted at a military past, was stepping out of the car with calculated slowness. His uniform was crisp, his badge catching the dim glow of the streetlight as he adjusted his belt. His name tag read, Blake Henderson. "Where you headed?" he asked, his tone friendly enough but laced with something else, something just beneath the surface suspicion. Nia let a beat pass, assessing his stance, the way his right hand hovered near his belt, not gripping his gun, but close enough. He was watching her, sizing her up the way a predator studies unfamiliar prey. She recognized that look. She had seen it too many times, both overseas and right here at home. "The bookstore," she replied simply, her voice steady. Blake Henderson tilted his head, his eyes flicking to the bag at her side. "That bag," he said, nodding toward it. "What's inside?" Nia inhaled slowly, keeping her expression neutral. She had expected this. The question wasn't driven by genuine curiosity, it was a test, a nudge to see how she would react. She had seen this script before: the vague questioning, the subtle escalation, the attempt to turn a routine interaction into something else. "Books." "Laptop," she replied, shifting her weight slightly, not out of nervousness but in preparation. Blake Henderson let out a dry chuckle, crossing his arms over his chest. "Mind if I take a look?" The words sounded casual, almost offhand, but Nia caught the underlying tone. The way he said it made it seem like she had a choice, but she knew better. If she refused, it would be deemed suspicious. If she agreed too easily, it would be seen as submission. Either way, he would take it as proof that he was in control. "Do you have a reason for asking?" she asked, her voice light but firm. Blake Henderson's smile didn't fade, but something in his posture stiffened. "You look like someone we're looking for," he said, the words sliding out smoothly, as if rehearsed. Nia felt the absurdity of the moment pressing down on her like a thick fog, matching a description the oldest excuse in the book. She had been in this situation before, had seen it play out too many times on the news and in viral phone recordings for all the wrong reasons. She didn't react, at least not outwardly. She had been trained for moments like this, trained to stay calm when things got tense. But she could feel it, the weight of eyes on her. Pedestrians on the sidewalk slowed down, some pretending not to notice, others openly watching. She exhaled slowly, giving a single nod. "You want to check?" she asked, her voice unnervingly steady, almost inviting. It threw him off. He shifted his stance, the smirk flickering away for a split second before being replaced by irritation. "I'm the one asking the questions here," he snapped, his hand moving slightly closer to his utility belt. Another moment of silence passed. Nia could hear the faint rustling of the small but growing crowd around them, the murmurs of curiosity and awareness. Someone nearby shifted their phone, just a small movement, but not one she missed. It was being recorded. "All right, officer," she said calmly. "Let's do this the right way." Her tone wasn't defiant, but it was controlled, precise, a statement, not a plea. And that, more than anything else, seemed to unsettle Blake Henderson. He squared his shoulders, stepping closer, his boots striking the pavement as he closed the distance. "Drop the bag," he ordered, his voice harder now, more authoritative, as if raising it could mask the unease creeping in. Nia didn't rush to comply. She let the silence stretch a second longer, just enough to tighten the tension. Then, with the composure honed from countless missions, she slipped the strap from her shoulder and placed the bag on the ground. No hesitation, no fear, just the steady control Blake Henderson hadn't expected. As he crouched down to grab the strap, the weight of a dozen phone cameras aimed at him became unmistakable. Nia caught the flicker of doubt in his eyes, a brief moment when he realized he had picked the wrong person. Blake Henderson tightened his grip on the bag, yanked the zipper open, and rifled through it like a predator searching for weakness. The streetlight cast its glow over the contents exactly as she had said. A laptop, a water bottle, and a hardcover book with a bold title, Resilient Leadership, Lessons from the Battlefield to the Boardroom. Right beneath it was the name Nia. Blake Henderson's smirk faltered for a split second. His fingers froze on the book cover, his gaze flickering over her name, momentary surprise flashing across his face, but he quickly masked it. He pulled the book out, holding it up as if it were contraband. "What is this?" His voice carried an awkward challenge. Nia didn't blink. "A book," she said, her voice smooth as glass. "Mine." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some exchanged knowing glances, someone let out a quiet chuckle. Blake Henderson clenched his jaw, a muscle ticking in his temple. He flipped through the pages quickly, as if searching for something incriminating, only to find lessons on discipline, leadership, and mental resilience, all written in her sharp, precise words. "You wrote this?" His scoff barely hid his disbelief. "That's what the cover says." No boasting, no arrogance, just a fact. And that unsettled him more than anything else. Blake exhaled sharply, shoving the book back into her bag with more force than necessary. He moved on to flipping her laptop over, as if hoping to find something suspicious. By now the crowd had thickened, the hum of whispers growing louder. More phones were raised, some openly, others more discreetly. Nia remained still, her expression unreadable. She didn't need to fight. He was burying himself. Every unnecessary gesture, every overextension of power, every flicker of discomfort in his eyes, each was another nail in his own coffin. And he knew it. He knew it. "Do you have identification?" Blake Henderson barked, desperate to regain control. Nia nodded slowly, pulling out a military ID from her case. Blake's eyes flicked over it. "Nia Harrison, U.S. Navy Special Operations." His face darkened. A flicker of hesitation crossed his features and the crowd noticed. "She's military." He really screwed up. Nia tilted her head, her voice smooth but cutting. "Do I still fit your description?" Blake ground his teeth and tossed her ID back. "That doesn't mean you're not a suspect." Nia caught the card and tucked it away. "Then you owe me a reason for stopping me." Silence stretched. Blake's eyes darted around, realizing this wasn't ending the way he wanted. "You're free to go," he said, stepping back as if reclaiming authority. Nia didn't move. "Not so fast. You accused me. You searched my belongings. These people deserve an explanation." The crowd stirred. "She's right." "What's the reason?" Blake Henderson stiffened, jaw clenching. It wasn't just anger, it was unease. Nia stood firm, arms crossed, waiting. Blake scanned the crowd, searching for an escape, but there wasn't one. The tension in the air thickened, murmurs turning into waves of outrage. "It was just a routine check," he said, trying to sound steady, but his words felt hollow. Nia raised an eyebrow. "Really? I didn't see you checking anyone else." The crowd erupted. A woman folded her arms coldly. "How many people have you searched tonight?" Blake froze. More phones pointed directly at him. Nia stepped forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "What was my description?" "A black woman walking with a bag." The crowd exploded. A young man scoffed. "Same old excuse." Blake recoiled slightly, his hand twitching near his belt, but he knew. He couldn't do anything. Nia met his eyes. "Tell me, what crime did I commit?" Silence stretched thick and suffocating. Finally, Blake Henderson inhaled sharply, his voice tight. "Just go." Nia didn't budge. "I always had the right to go." The crowd cheered. Blake's face burned red as he turned to leave, but Nia stepped in his path. "Hold on, officer." He froze. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. "We're not done here." "Hurry. What more do you want now?" Blake Henderson snapped, but his voice lacked the strength it once had. Nia didn't blink. "You stopped me, searched me in front of everyone. Now I want you to say it clearly. What crime did I commit?" Blake Henderson opened his mouth but said nothing. He searched for an excuse and escape but found none. Nia let the silence stretch before continuing, her voice cold. "Or admit that you never had a reason in the first place." Blake Henderson's face tensed. The crowd held its breath. And then, "I was wrong." The words were stiff, reluctant, but they were spoken. The crowd erupted, phones raised to capture the moment. Blake Henderson turned away, heading toward his car like a man walking away from the wreckage of his own making. Nia didn't move until he disappeared from sight. She picked up her bag and exhaled slowly. She had won. But this wasn't just about her. It was about all the times this had happened without a camera recording it. A voice rang out, firm and authoritative. "What's going on here?" The crowd parted. A black female officer stepped forward, Lieutenant Raquel Barnes. Unlike Blake Henderson, she wasn't looking for control, she was assessing the situation. Her sharp gaze landed on Blake Henderson. No words were spoken, but something in her posture, in her stare, made him freeze, made him seem smaller. Raquel Barnes exhaled and turned to Nia. The air around them shifted. "Nia," she said, her voice softer, more familiar. Nia tilted her head slightly. "Lieutenant." It was acknowledgement, not intimacy. Two black women, both having seen too much to misunderstand what this was. Raquel Barnes looked at Nia, then at her bag, before turning back to Blake Henderson. Her expression darkened, but she only addressed Nia. "Tell me what happened." Nia didn't hesitate. Her voice was steady, calm, but deliberate. "He stopped me without cause, searched my bag in front of everyone. When that wasn't enough, he tried to escalate, until he saw this." She pulled out her military ID, holding it up. Raquel Barnes glanced at it, her jaw tightening. "This isn't the first time," Nia said. Then the crowd started filming, and that's when he got nervous. Raquel Barnes nodded and turned to the crowd. "Who recorded the entire incident?" A young woman raised her phone. "I started filming the moment he pulled up." Raquel Barnes watched the video, her face growing tenser. In less than a minute, she made her decision. She turned back to Nia, her voice firm but carrying a weight of sincere regret. "On behalf of this department, I apologize." Nia studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. Raquel Barnes exhaled and turned to Blake Henderson. "Blake Henderson." Before he could react, she reached for the badge on his chest, removing it in one swift, decisive motion. The metallic click was small, but in the crowd, it was the loudest sound of all. Blake Henderson stiffened, his lips parting to protest, but when his eyes met Raquel Barnes' The words died in his throat. "Turn around," she ordered. For the first time, he hesitated. But there was no escape, no way out. He had built this moment with his own hands, and now it had turned against him. Slowly, stiffly, he turned. The crowd held its breath. Raquel Barnes pulled the handcuffs from her belt. The metallic snap of the cuffs echoed sharply. A woman in the crowd murmured, "Well, damn." Blake Henderson didn't look at anyone as Raquel Barnes gripped his arm and led him toward the patrol car. His shoulders slumped slightly, his head bowed, not in reflection, not in regret, but in shame. Nia said nothing. She didn't need to say anything. As Raquel Barnes placed Blake Henderson into the back seat of the patrol car, Nia adjusted her bag, took a deep breath, and finally walked away. She kept moving. No one stopped her. Behind her, she could still hear the murmurs of the crowd, the slam of the patrol car door, and she could picture Blake Henderson sitting inside, head bowed, future uncertain. She didn't look back. Because tonight wasn't about him. It was about all the moments before this. About all the times no one was recording. About all the times no one had the power to resist. And about what happens next. The story ends with an important question. If the incident hadn't been recorded, would justice have been served? Nia was not the first person to experience this, and sadly, she may not be the last. But what made this time different was the presence of witnesses, evidence, and an officer who had the courage to do the right thing. This forces us to reflect, is justice truly guaranteed, or does it only exist when we demand it? What do you think about this story? Do you believe that small actions like recording a video or speaking out against injustice can change someone's life? Share your thoughts in the comments because conversations like this are the first step toward real change. Justice is in our hands. Personally, this story serves as a reminder that justice doesn't rest solely in the hands of those in power, it is also in our hands. Every action, no matter how small, can create a ripple effect that leads to something bigger. If we stand up together, if we speak out together, then maybe one day stories like this will no longer need to be told. Note, this story is entirely fictional and created for the purpose of raising awareness. It highlights issues of accountability, justice, and the importance of treating all individuals with respect and dignity. We firmly stand against violence, prejudice, and injustice in all forms. Viewer discretion is advised.